Okay, a few things logistically. This amplifier has one channel out, and we do want to try and get all of the comments on the tape. And so if you have something, unfortunately, to say or a question to ask, the only choice is come forward. I'll hand the mic over the top of the podium to you, and you can put in your question. They found this out last session that this one channel is completely out. It's not chords or anything else. It's just the channel's gone. So you might want to tell Hilton they got a dead soldier here. All right. I'm Cal Campbell. We were supposed to have the presence of Bob Howell on this panel. Since Bob couldn't be here, the issue that I wanted to talk about when I proposed the panel was I wanted to talk about Dorothy Shaw, who was Pappy's wife, and the Lloyd Shaw Foundation. Well, there aren't many of us left who went through that experience. And so I decided I would arbitrarily ask Judy, my wife, who is my partner on all this, to come on up and talk. The gentleman on my right is Bob Riggs. Bob Riggs, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess you would say, was young enough that he never had the opportunity to go to the fellowship and never had the opportunity to meet Mrs. Shaw, but he has been extremely active in the Lloyd Shaw Foundation. And so that's what you're going to get today, is the mixture of it. I wish there were some other dear friends who could be here to talk to you, because I can't tell all the stories, and I think if I try and talk too much, I'm probably going to get very emotional. So with that, I'd like to start out with Bob and talking about a couple issues. I think he's going to also do something with the Western Do-Si-Do. All righty, so we'll start out with Bob Riggs.
All right. My very first introduction to the Lloyd Shaw environment was about 1974, sometime between in the fall of 74 and 75. I was dancing. I had seen square dancing the first time in my life in July 74. Some girl got me into it. And at the festival, and I guess it was in the festival in the spring of 75, Dorothy Shaw came up to CSU. And at the time, I barely knew she was there, but I did see her and I did listen to her speak at that event. I didn't have any further contact with the Shaw legacy for many, many years, until one day Cal says, "Bob, the Lloyd Shaw Foundation sponsors a dance week, and we need somebody to come up and teach some round dances." And I'm going, "But Cal, you know I'm a square dance caller that teaches and cues rounds, but I'm predominantly a square dance caller." He says, "Yes, but you teach very well, and I want you to come up and co-teach with Judy and I." So we went, my wife Ellen and I went up to the YMCA of the Rockies outside of Fraser, Colorado. And that place is somewhere between 8,000 and 9,000 feet above sea level. It's a gorgeous spot in this state. And I don't remember what we taught. At the time we had, let's see, that was 1989, which meant we had two of our daughters. One was crawling around the stage giving us a hard time and those kinds of things. Anyway, the Lloyd Shaw Foundation has a mission, and its mission is, and I'll just read it to you because probably most of you don't know, but the mission of the foundation today is to recall, restore, and teach the folk rhythms of the American people. The foundation's music, educational materials, dance camps, and seminars strive to advance this mission. So that's basically what that organization is all about. I have been on the board of directors of the Lloyd Shaw Foundation for the past 5 years. I have been director of the Rocky Mountain Dance Roundup for the past 9 years. And the characteristic of this is that it's not just square dancing. It's not just round dancing. It's not just English country dancing. It's not just international folk. It's not just et cetera, et cetera. It's a diversity of dance. The 4 camps that currently are held by the Lloyd Shaw Foundation are all camps aimed at an experience across a wide range of dance. My experiences with the Rocky Mountain Dance Roundup, the Cumberland Camp and Terpsichore's Holiday, I can't ever say that word, are the other, okay, so I can't count. Other 2. It is 3. I was going, where's number 4? But all of these camps are aimed at a diversity of dance. And so in the camps, in the Rocky Mountain Dance Roundup, we have squares, and that involves both traditional squares and modern squares. It involves rounds, sometimes very old rounds, like some of the ones we did last night, like Black Hawk Waltz and Varsouvienne, and those kinds of round dances, but also modern ones that are done in the round dance community here. Contras, we tend to be more of the classical contras that are done, and there's a lot of modern contras as well, but we don't tend to do very many of those. International folk dance, we've had several international folk dance leaders, and when I originally heard the word folk dance, all I could visualize was what I saw out on the plaza at CSU, which was virtually all Israeli. And I went, okay, I don't really like folk dance in that mode. And so one of the things I learned very quickly as I became associated with this organization was the diversity of that dance form, and more about all of the dances that from all around the world. We think we have some very unique things in our dance, in American square dance, but we don't realize where they came from. Now, I don't know whether I have this quote right, but my understanding was that Dorothy Shaw was firmly convinced that every single call we had in our American square dance lexicon came from some folk dance somewhere. And the story goes, as I heard it, was that near the end of her life, she was convinced of this, but she couldn't find the origin of the Thar Star. And I guess she took a trip to Europe in the latter years of her life, and she was in a little town in Austria. And there they were, out in the street dancing their national folk dance, and lo and behold, there was the Thar Star. And she went, aha, I was right. Now, that's the story as I heard it. These guys might be able to give me credence as to whether I'm telling it correctly or not.
We heard it was in a theater where she had gone to see a folk dance performance, but who knows which one's right. The thing that was interesting was the fact that she was so excited. I mean, she was just ecstatic. She wanted to tell us all about this, and the fact that both her and Pappy felt that everything we do in dancing has already been done in the past. And so this is where the excitement came from. Pappy Shaw, for many years, was given credit for having invented the element Thar Star. Instead of being disappointed at Pappy being discredited, she was pleased that she'd found history.
I'd like to add just one more thing to that. When the teen group went to the Ukraine here a couple of years ago, they came back, and some of them talked to me and said, we saw so many square dance figures being done in their local folk dances.
Absolutely. I was on that trip, and we were standing there watching these dances, and it was fascinating. There was the right and left grands and all the arm turns and all the stars and all the circles and even the what we call square throughs types of figures. They were all there. In spite of the fact that we were going square through, it had a date it was invented, but the patterns were there. I saw them. I wanted to do something a little different. I am one of those folks that are very emphatic about the correct use of the word do-sa-do and do-si-do. When I hear a caller say do-si-do, in my mind I have what they did last night. All right? I don't have in mind a back-to-back do-sa-do. So one of the things I wanted to do today is I wanted to show you the do-si-do as is written up in this book, which is Cowboy Dances, written by Lloyd Shaw. This is one of the books that Lloyd Shaw held up this morning. This is my copy of it. And if you'd like to look at this after the session, the other book he held up this morning was the Round Dance book. I only have two of his books, but I'm sure Cal has more, not here, but he probably has them all. So I would like two couples to come out and in the middle of the floor down here. Can I pass this over the top? All right. So can I get a volunteer? I need 4 people who are willing to try something. All right. All right. All right. Can I get a lady? This will be a lot easier with a lady and a gent. All right. So now I want you to get up so that you have a circle. You can join hands in a circle. All right. But I want you to think about this. Now turn back so you're just couples and drop hands. Now I want you to do this. I want you to think about where your partner is. All right. But I want you to start out by going in and the ladies pass left shoulders. And go back to your partner and give your partner a left hand. Now, turn left. And walk around them. Men, don't turn around. Don't turn around, men. Pull her around behind her. Go on around. And let go when you have to. Now, come back through the middle. Pass right shoulders. Give him a right hand. Go back across. Give your partner a left hand. And now you can courtesy turn, men. All right. The original do-si-do has the men sort of moving backwards and forwards, but not changing facing direction. You're basically taking the lady and pulling the lady around with your left hand around behind, and then around, and then getting the other one and bring her around this way, and then courtesy turning. Okay? No twirls, no nothing. This is just basic stuff. All right? And by the way, there is a handout, and it is written up in here if you want to see what this one is, all right? So ladies, again, walk by left shoulders, give your partner a left hand, walk around them, go back, give your opposite a right hand, give your partner a left hand, and courtesy turn. All right, I think we got something in there that's a little bit wrong, but because something's not looking quite right. All right. Okay, we're going to do it one more time, but slowly. All right. So ladies, pass left shoulders. Give your partner a left hand. Turn left face. Okay. But this time, don't cross right shoulders. Just reach out and take the opposite's right hand. Yeah. And walk around them. Got the wrong shoulder. Now give your partner a left hand. There you go. That's right. All right. That looks right. Does that make sense? All right. So now one of the masters of the history of the do-si-do in my book is Dr. Bill Litchman from Albuquerque, New Mexico, who we were hoping to have on our panel at one point, but he couldn't come as well. He portrays the do-si-do as a series of turns, and he does things a little bit differently in the way he does it, okay? let's do the Western do-si-do that we just did, and then we're going to change it a little and bring it up a stage. And all of this is part of the folk process that happened to these figures as time went through, okay? So, do-si-do. There you go. Oh, they're perfect. You let go when you have to. You change hands? Yeah, that would be part of the folk process. Okay. All right. Well, nobody's expected to pull shoulders out, okay? Now, again, this is how I understand it by reading the words in the book. And it is also, the first time I ever did this, Merrill Folsom was the first time that I'd ever seen this done. And I went, oh, is that a do-si-do? All right. So let's change it a little. But this time, instead of the ladies passing left shoulders, I want you to think about, join hands in your circle. It'll actually be the same pattern. If the ladies roll left across their partner, roll away to the left across their partner, give the opposite a right hand, walk by, give the partner a left hand, turn it a long turn around, reach behind the other man. Oh, okay. Messed it up. I'll get it right. Hold on. All right. We're doing a do-si-do, which is, and modified, which is the way Bill takes the raw do-si-do and makes it a Western do-si-do in what he does, okay? So reverse roll away. Okay, right, walk straight by, give a left, turn all the way around, give a right. Yep. Yeah. Back up. Okay, you need to reach behind him. There you go. That's what's happening. Turn right, look for the partner, courtesy turn. All right. This is always hard the first time. All right. So join hands. Reverse roll away. Right, walk by. Left. Right. Courtesy turn. All right. All right. So that is the Western do-si-do that is just beyond the raw in the book do-si-do. All right. One more time. Join hands. Reverse roll away. Right. Left. Right. Courtesy turn. Oh, you guys are good. All right. Now, join hands. Circle left. Break it up with the do-si-do. Reverse roll away. Do it. Right. Left. Right. Courtesy turn. Oh, very good. We got you trained. All right. Now, there's one more little thing, but we won't do it right now. But there's an actual left face turn and some spins that you add to make it what they did last night. You're hot now? Yeah, but we want to let these guys have some time. All right. Thank you very much.
Before I start into my subject, one of the things that I have noticed in modern Western square dancing is that the fact that we have deserted swings and we have deserted arm turns. Arm turns are valuable. There's all kinds of stuff you can go. This sort of thing down here, you almost have to have a visual picture before you can do it. If we were to put this in the sequence right now as to where it ought to be, it would probably be up around A1 or A2 as far as for a concept. In other words, it's that much in difficulty. All right. What I want to do, and I hope Judy adds to you, I want to talk to you about Mrs. Shaw. The gentleman this morning mentioned that Pappy had married a very brilliant lady. And I think he was being kind, but he was also in the minds of many of us who had a lot of association with Mrs. Shaw, understating. You need to look at Mrs. Shaw from the context of the time. At that point in time, a woman's place was in the home and in support of her husband. The husband was out front. He got the headlines. But let me tell you a little bit about the story, about how I met Mrs. Shaw, and Judy later on joined me. We were going to be involved in the first national pageant of square dancing. It was held in Denver in 1959. Pappy died in 1957, and he was supposed to be helping to organize this thing. So when he died, this was a shock, and they looked at Mrs. Shaw and says, Mrs. Shaw says, nope, this is going to go on. Part of the pageant was a dance exhibition that used the same formation that I used last night in that Royal Square, and it was called the Royal Lancers. Well, since the dancers at CSU were already using the formation, she wanted to come up to ask us college kids, hot-shot square dancers, if we wanted to take on an ancient dance that came around 1860. And I'll tell you, frankly, we weren't too darn enthusiastic about it. But Laffy Miller, who was a caller up in Fort Collins, says, you kids need to sit down and listen to this lady. And so we decided we would sit down and listen. We were up in a big ballroom. And we were all scattered down on the floor, and there was a 3-step stool that was sitting in the middle of the floor. Came across the floor, this little old lady. She was kind of bent over. I think probably she had a little osteoporosis. And he introduced her very formally, and she crawled up on that stool and sat around. And she started to paint a scene. Of a ballroom and a band and ladies in gorgeous clothes and men in uniform. We fell in love. You know, we really did. We sat there and we listened to this lady, and by the time she got done with about 20 minutes, we would have done anything in the world for her. We were very fortunate, I think, in the fact that the music was not present for the Royal Lancers. And we had to go in and do a lot of the research. In other words, she assigned us the task of doing research and going back and researching this dance. And then we worked with her. She came up 3 or 4 times to correct it. We tried out music. So we had constant contact with her over about the next year and a half to go put on this pageant. Man, what an impressive person. I mean, she'd come up there and tell us stories. Okay, previous to this, Pappy had told the stories. Pappy had done the background. Now here was Dorothy stepping forward. All right, the second thing that happened right after Pappy died, for a number of years, he held summer camps up in Colorado Springs, and they were started out with 1 week, and then it got to 2 weeks, and I think eventually it ended up, as I recall, somebody may be able to tell me that, you know, around those camps, ended up with at least 3 sessions. And I used to sit down and talk to Bob Osgood about Pappy, and he would tell me stories. I also used to room at these conventions when Judy didn't come. I roomed with Herb Egener, and I heard all these stories about what went on. Herb was in Pappy's school. Dorothy was the librarian. She also taught English. Most of the kids that come out of that era have as much reverence for Dorothy as they've got for Pappy. Okay, a couple of the little tidbits about Dorothy. He mentioned this morning, says Dorothy was a poet. Folks, she wasn't just a poet. She was a poet well enough respected in poetry cycles that Carl Sandburg came by during the summer tours to visit with her and discuss poetry. She was that good. I'm going to read you a poem at the end. I'm going to try. All righty. At the point where Pappy died, and they were holding kind of a sort of a summer camp of a lot of people who had danced with in these summer camps over the years, they were saying, gee whiz, Pappy's dead, we're going to quit. Dorothy said, no, And she had this little bit where she would stomp her foot, no, and kind of purse her lips. And so they had this camp going in which people kind of came and danced and exchanged dances. And Dorothy came up to him one day and she apparently said, we are going to have to change what we're doing. We're going to have some young people come to this camp. And at that point in time, I was going down about every Monday night to Colorado Springs on 2-lane highways, going to the Monday night dance at a little swing club in a little hall that would hold about 3 squares. And we'd get done with the session at the swing club. Then we'd go up to the house, have hot chocolate, sit around and listen to Dorothy talk for an hour, and then drive back to Fort Collins. And I was trying to become a veterinary student. You know, that was sheer insanity. And we did this during snowstorms, doing everything else. Because she had all this stuff that she wanted to poke in our heads. And it was just worth going down. It was one of the most educational periods in my life. All right. We got invited to come to something called the Lloyd Shaw Fellowship. And the Lloyd Shaw Fellowship was held in August, as the camps have been held in August. It was a group of about 50 people who Dorothy personally invited and decided who was going to come. We went up and danced in a little bitty hall called Samia that would hold about 3 squares. We ate out on the patio. We ate out underneath the trees. And a typical day was kind of like this. We would start out in the morning, and on the first morning, we'd say the Pledge of Allegiance. And then every morning, we'd go back to this hall, and we'd sit around, and we would sing for about 15 minutes. All kinds of songs, usually led by Bob Howell and a guy by the name of Kirby Todd. And then Mrs. Shaw would come in the morning and sit down and talk, and you never knew what was coming. Some of it Pappy was writing a book when he died, and we might hear a chapter out of the book. She might find something in the newspaper that interested her. We might have an English lesson. Okay? In other words, it wasn't all about dancing. It was about, a lot of ways, it was about a way of living. It was about a philosophy of life. It was not so much about dance as it was why to dance, the reason for dancing, the philosophy behind it, the motivation behind it, okay? Then the rest of the day was spent with all of these people who I had heard about all my life, coming and presenting dances or talking about dancing. And here, imagine the impact on a young college student just forming my ideals. When I started, all I had an interest in becoming was a hotshot square dance caller. That was my passion. I went to that pageant that we put on, and I stood there on the sidelines, and I watched this history roll before me on that dance floor. Chuck Jones, the famous cartoon Bugs Bunny, was the master of ceremonies at that thing. And I watched all this pass before me, and a whole world just opened up. I went to the Lloyd Shaw Fellowship, and there were all of these people there that literally said, Cal, Judy, come here, and showed us how to do things. And sat down with us underneath the trees and talked to us. And poured this stuff in that head that you could open up at that age and just poured it in. Judy and I lived at that point in time, after we got married, we lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico, actually Santa Fe for a while, and then down in Albuquerque, and we had parents up in Colorado. Whenever we would come up to Colorado, we would stop by and see Mrs. Shaw. And usually we would plan probably 3 or 4 hours to sit around and visit with her. Because she had this and that and whatnot to talk about. We would talk about philosophy of dancing, et cetera, with this lady. And I can honestly tell you, folks, that without a doubt, Judy and I probably wouldn't be married today if it hadn't been for learning all this stuff. The other thing that was just a ball was the fact that our children grew up in this environment. When we came to the camps, we didn't leave the kids with a babysitter. All of us young people that were invited over the years to come into the Lloyd Shaw Foundation and the Lloyd Shaw Fellowship brought the kids. And so the kids danced. And we packed them up, and they slept underneath the tables, and they played in the yard, and we stayed in seedy hotels, and we all worked at this, and we all grew up together. And we ended up, in a period of the 17 years that Judy and I attended, there were a group of probably about 10 college students out of CSU and CU who ended up being very much involved in the Lloyd Shaw Fellowship. And part of it is the fact that we have stayed together as friends for a lifetime, and a lot of these people are still active. I mentioned Bill Litchman. Bill Litchman was the president for the Lloyd Shaw Foundation for many years. How many of you remember Ken Kernan? Is he still in anybody's mind? Yeah. Ken Kernan and his wife Sharon. Who? John Bradford. I don't know whether you know these people, but we ended up kind of going in two different branches. I went off on modern Western square dancing. Ken Kernan did the same thing. Bill Litchman went off on traditional dancing, and another gentleman who was very much involved in this state was called Gib Gilbert. But this is where we started. And we started, to be very honest, it wasn't only Dorothy. It was Don Armstrong was a milestone winner who had a very strong influence. Bob Howell, who I was hoping would be sitting here. Phyllis is having knees replaced. The reason he isn't here was here. We had a round dance teacher that was absolutely fantastic by the name of Dina Fresh. And we also had a second one by the name of Carlotta Hagerman, that if you had been around 30 or 40 years ago would have been the household names that you would have heard in the dance world. They came volunteering their time and gathered up us young folks and said, here, learn from us, listen to us. I want to talk to you about it. You know, it was a fantastic environment. The point that Bob made about the fact that there was a whole cross-section of dances that we did was very important. We went from the stage of only being two-dimensional, would have been square dancing and round dancing, to being multi-dimensional in terms of what we were willing to accept in dance world. I think, frankly, that's going to be the future of dancing. I should shut up a little bit and let Judy talk for a little while. You want to talk?
This was a last-minute thing for me, but I literally grew up once I met Dorothy Shaw. I was 20 years old, and here, this beautiful, soft, wonderful, wonderful lady. You could sit and listen to her for hours. Snow white hair, sitting up on her little stool up in front of the room. And I worked very closely with her because they took dance notes for the whole week, and I had typed every one of them for her for all the years that I was there. And so I would be in her office with her and get that chance to really talk with her personally. And she had a great influence on our children. And I can honestly say that there's so much that she had to share. How many of you have seen a couple of the films about the Lloyd Shaw? Anybody? Like The Invisible Anthem? There was a couple of movies made, and one of them was called The Invisible Anthem, and it's still The Visible Anthem. The Visible Anthem. And if you haven't seen it, you ought to try and get your hands on it and see it. It tells so very much, and it shows the dancing, and it has Mrs. Shaw on it, and you can listen to her talk. And I think it's just a great gift. And where is that available right now? I know the Lloyd Shaw Foundation has it available for you. I know we had it digitized, and then it got put on the DVD. So you could buy that DVD from the Lloyd Shaw Foundation, and you can actually see a lot of this happening. You can hear Dorothy Shaw talk. You can see visually these things that Cal is talking about that we did. There was one more thing that we did. The Shaws have a cabin outside of Colorado Springs. And we used to go out there for a picnic every year when we would come to this weekly session. And we would sit around and we would talk, and we would sing, and we would just be so close. We'd play games together, and it was like a family. And we all came to love her and one another very much, and I think it was because of her influence. I'm going to cry now.
Okay, I've been writing up, and you're welcome to have these things. The Lloyd Shaw Fellowship, or the Lloyd Shaw Foundation, has a publication called the American Dance Circle that comes out 4 times a year. And I'm kind of getting to the place where I'm, being nostalgic about all this, and I've been trying to sit down and figure out what made that particular environment work. And there's been several other people organize or echoing this as I've been going around this week. Number one, we were very much socially integrated with each other, probably more than anything else. In other words, we were brought together, and by the time we left the week, we were total friends. And we have stayed friends for a lifetime. And as you go in and take a look at dancing or anything that you're doing, I think probably in the clubs that I have called for, I have always felt the successful point was not the dancing as much as it was the social friends. That's personal feel. In other words, the dancing was the bricks. The friendships was the mortar that held it together. Okay, number two, we ate together. When we would come to the fellowship, we always ate lunch at the house up there. And we would gather our stuff underneath the arboretum that she had up there, and then we would go sit under the trees and talk. And during the time when we sat underneath the trees and talked is when we really got to know each other, more than socially. Number three, and this is going to sound a little bit different, we sang together. We started out every morning with song, and we ended up every evening with song. Little trick for you. I tried to figure out why the singing was so special for many years, and I had a songmaster, one that leads choruses, tell me. He says, well, it's simple. You take a look at any choir and tell me what they look like. They're a bunch of people standing up there, crowded together, side to side and front to back, right? In order for people to hear each other, they have to be close together. And this particular songmaster I ran onto at a recreation camp, he would stand in the middle of the circle, the next 4 people to stand right around him. I mean so close you couldn't hardly turn your shoulders. The next tier would be right behind them, as close in as they could get, and so on out until you got all the singers in there. And he would stand in the middle. The sound was fantastic because you were right there just like you would be in a choir. Okay, when we sang up at La Semilla, this was a little bitty hall, low ceiling. When we sang in that hall, there were 50 of us crowded into a room shoulder to shoulder, sprawled out across the floor. The sound just rolled through. And so we all heard each other. And that's a little trick. It was, it was forced onto us, but that's one of the things that made it work. And so to me, the 3 legs that made the fellowship work were dance together, eat together, sing together. Okay, what do we do now in square dancing that's been successful? We've all had clubs where when we got done with the dancing, we went out and ate, right? We've gone on camps where we sat down, and one of the things is sit around the fireplace or sit around the fire and sing. I had a club in Albuquerque where we had several people who were going through medical problems and would go for long periods when they couldn't dance. They would come to the dance and sit around and talk. They didn't want to miss their friends. Even though they couldn't dance, they didn't want to miss their friends. See, this all, it's not so much what we dance as why we dance. And that was the Shaw philosophy. That was Pappy's philosophy. It was Dorothy's philosophy as to why we dance. Okay. We're about 15. No, we've still got a bit of time. All righty. Dorothy was a poet. This is in the book, and I want to read it to you, and I hope I can get through it. Waltz with me, darling, before we go home. Light in my arms is a handful of foam. Light in my arms as the moonlight it spills over magical hills. Grandmother danced in a happier day. Under her hoop skirts, her slipper toes play. Under the arbor of similac and rose, with a step and a close. Bring back, dear grandmother, gladness a while, her light little feet, her bright little smile. Waltz with me, darling, beneath a big moon, to a sweet three-quarter tune. Lilacs in blossom have scented the air, stars in your eyes and a rose in your hair. Waltz with me, darling, with wings on your feet. Nothing was ever so sweet, so sweet. Okay, that's Dorothy to me. That's Dorothy to me. Anybody else want to make a comment?
I think one of the things that, since we're in a session labeled History, Heritage, and Tradition, you have to look at so many of the younger callers have no concept of what they know more than 15, maybe 20 years ago. There is a whole history behind what we do and why we do it. And so one of the purposes of this session is to say, there is a little bit behind what you see when you go to a modern Western square dance today. Where did it come from and why? And Lloyd Shaw, since we're in Lloyd Shaw's town, had a tremendous impact on what we do. And the ripple effect, as I understand it, those people who attended both his seminars, his summer seminars, summer classes, and those people who attended the fellowship after he passed on, were tremendously impacted by the philosophy. Those people went across the world and influenced others. I'm one of those people that were influenced not by him directly, but by the second round, so to speak. And I think that's an important thing to recognize. It's where it came from, where the philosophy came from. And maybe these guys are rubbing off on me, I don't know, but I look at successful dance activities today, and what Cal said about the social aspect. I walked into clubs that I'm calling for, and I call a regular dance, and they come in, they dance, and they dance clear up till 10 o'clock, and they have to be out by 10:05. And what happens is we get the music, the dance, but none of the fellowship. And it creates a huge hole, because I see those people, they're not friends with each other. They're people that show up in the same square and dance with each other. But they have no opportunity to even have just the fellowship that can happen with little visitation afterwards. Whether that be sitting around the table and eating some good snacks and adding calories to ourselves and so on, or whether it be singing. Those of you who were here last night and saw the end of the program and had the opportunity to participate in the Cannon Waltzer, the very last thing we did that you guys all got to join in, I hadn't seen that before about 1980-something. It might have been the very first time I went to Rocky Mountain Dance Roundup. But if you do that, imagine if everyone has a candle and you're doing it in a dark room, and you do it just like we did it last night. What's the impact of that? I bet you everyone who participated in it last night felt something. You felt something because you joined hands with the people on either side of you, and suddenly you were joined with a whole group of people, no matter how many. I carry that forward when I do entertainment at nursing homes, which I sometimes do. I try to get all of the participants to sit close enough to each other so that they can join hands. And somewhere in the course of the demonstration, we'll do a little sit dance. But the most important part of that sit dance is the joining hands. And I will tell them, I said, I want you to say hi to the person 3 chairs to your right through your hands. And you know what? It means something to them. That's the fellowship. That's the fellowship that Lloyd Shaw and many of us who are sort of the receivers of the philosophy can feel and know. And I'm trying to pass that on to the people around me, and I know that's what Cal and Judy are doing.
You triggered a memory. One of the things we used to do, a tremendous amount of fun at the fellowship, we had a full dress cotillion. I mean full dress to the fact that we had the program that you hung on the ladies' wrists with all the dance listed. And you would go start out at the beginning of the evening, and you had to go around, the men had to go around, and to invite ladies to come dance with them, and you entered the name on the program. And then the whole program was laid out for the whole evening. The ladies made very elegant dresses and brought to that. For many years, we got to dance in the ballroom up at the Broadmoor Hotel. I don't know if you guys know about the Broadmoor Hotel up here or not, but it's an extremely expensive place. And management would give us the ballroom for free. And we would go out on the edge of the lake up there and stroll around and have this thing and carry our ladies arm in arm. The ladies oftentimes wore gloves. The men were dressed up fit to kill. We played a role. That's the point I'm trying to get at. We stepped back into elegance for a period of time and had a good time. I don't know how many of you remembered last night, but the first contra dance that we did was the oldest dance called Hole in the Wall. We're talking about contra and traditional. Hole in the Wall, if you think of it, about the dance, is extremely simple. The dance has the number one couple roll down, or what we call cast down, and then number 2 casts up, and then 1 and 2, number 1 man, the number 2 lady, trade places, and then the other 2 trade places. They circle half and roll down. I mean, you can't imagine a dance that probably is any more simpler than that. But then you add to that dance the styling that goes along with it. And we would, during the week, Hole in the Wall was very much of a favorite dance for the cotillion. And we would take the first part of the week and bring back the memories that we had and teach the new people who would come the styling that went with it, where you step into the center before you start your roll down, and the bows and the curtsies and the hand motions that probably those people learned at that particular point in history. And once the music went on, then basically you step into a role that becomes that part of history, and you let the music flow through, and you turn on your brain, and you're on stage. With a dance extremely simple, and once all the people are there and you're doing it, it captures you. And a lot of the traditional dances are that way. We've got, in trying to choose the dances for last night, I had a terrible time. Because as I would talk to the people on the team, when we'd talk over the dances, this one would pop up, and then this one would pop up, and this one would pop up. And we would also, that's a favorite. It's got to be in the program. Right? Oh, golly, we can't forget this. We can't forget that. But we had to, you have to pick and choose. But there are some tremendous pearls that are out there And this whole business of playing a role, like we do with like we did here with the cotillions, a theme perhaps for your club, to where you pick an evening and the ladies do show up in beautiful gowns, and you do have a posted program, and you take and step back in the role. I think in many ways could still be done. 2 years ago, well, whenever the National was in Denver, they asked me to do a program on dances from the 40s and the 50s. And in Denver, the hall was so full, people had to take turns dancing. And these were old, very simple, traditional dances. Simple things, but a broad cross-section of stuff. Tried the same thing in Portland. We had, I think it was 3 squares. It depends on, I think, how it's advertised. But there's lots there, and I guess one of the feelings I would have is there are probably 2 or 3 keys. Number one, a stream cross-section, a stream amount of variety in what we did. Number 2, play roles. When I work with the team, one of the things that I try and do when I work with the teams is when we take on a piece of, or take on a dance, I try to build the scene behind the dance. I research the dance, and then I try to build the scene behind the dance that not only includes the dance itself, but it includes the costumes. Because if you think about dancing for many, many years, well, all through history, the costume that the people were wearing controlled what they danced. Okay? When the Varsuviana was first written 250 years ago, the ladies danced in bone dresses. They had their waists cinched down. They wore extremely uncomfortable shoes. Their hair had a wig on top of it, probably 18 inches tall, infested with vermin, as I understand from reading history. The men's costume, the coats had to be built with the arm on a curve because the coats were so heavy and the cloth was so stiff that if they didn't build them on a curve, they couldn't get the drink to their mouth.
So they couldn't really straighten their
And you certainly didn't unbutton it. You wore these neat little things around your legs that didn't cover your legs from about the knees down, and buckled, and silk stockings, and you postured, and one of the things you're supposed to do, you were supposed to show the lady your calf if it was shapely enough. The men were. Okay. This is how you build a dance and how you build the scene that the people fall into. Right? You didn't have men touching ladies. Both of you wore gloves. And when you wore gloves, still the ladies were very reluctant about contacting that filthy old glove on the man. See the things you do as far as for building up the role as you want to take on one of these dances? Okay, let's go the opposite direction. Let's go up to, say, something that you want to pick up in the more rambunctious Western style. Let's say you're doing something about the Mormon migration to the West, and you're dancing out in the dirt. What kind of dances would these people be done? Basically, what happened was, I'm getting off track. I better shut up. Basically, what happened was that the dance masters were making a good living back east. They had the halls, they had a good living, and so when the wagons headed west and the pioneers headed west, and all these people were coming out west, and square dancing was really getting the birth that contributed to what we are now. They had no leaders. They had a fiddler who maybe remembered a little bit. Okay? And he came with the wagons. The dance master stayed home because that's where the living was. You know where the caller came from? Out of necessity. The fiddler was there, and he stood up on the edge of the wagon, and he hollered the directions that he remembered. And that's how the caller was born. He hollered the directions that he remembered. Do you know how square dance or where the square came from? Okay? The halls back east in the popular form of dancing was really the long ways dance, the contra dance. And so the halls were all built, I'm on a soapbox. The halls were all built as big long halls. And if you go back to the east, you can still find these big long halls are back there. They were designed for the dance that was popular during the time. Okay, what happens? You get out here in the west, you've got two places you can hold a party. You can hold a party out there in the front yard, which is normally a little square patch, right? Or you can take all the furniture out of the house, you can hold it in the house. Guess what shape the house was? The shape of the house was square. And with all the furniture out, somebody could sit there on the ledge and holler directions. That's where the square dance came from. They took the four-couple formation came out of necessity of where they were dancing more than any other single thing. You know, it became a natural thing. Dancing was very popular. Judy and I spent a lot of years in New Mexico. And if you go down there, what you find in the ranch houses or in the ranching environment, you find the adobe house and you find this walled patio that goes all the way around. It was built for defenses. When they had the parties down there, they swept off the adobe. It's just as hard as rock. And they held the party, but this area that they danced in was essentially more conducive to dancing in squares than it was any other single thing. Okay?
Sure, and tell them about schoolhouses, too.
Do what?
Schoolhouses. I don't know how many of you study any kind of history, but I'm sure you have, or you've gone through an old town and you'll see the little bitty schoolhouse. What shape is it? It's a square. And what they used to do is go in and they'd slide all the desks and everything back and around the edge of the room, and then they would hold their dance in the middle of that room. Once again, a square dance.
Okay. And the evolution of the Varsuviana that we did last night, Bob and Al Lynn choreographed this out of research out of the Round Dance book. If you take a look at the various forms they did, it became more exuberant and more twirls and whatnot as the costumes, on particularly the ladies, became less restricting. Okay, the first was the mazurka, which was very stiff and very dull. And then as we went through the 5 sequences of that dance, the dance gets more and more rolls and more twirls. You couldn't have done the 4th sequence that we did in a hoop skirt. Because if you did the inertia of the hoop skirt, number one, by the time they got around, the skirt would have just started its travel, and then it would have gone all the way around and probably wrapped around the guy's neck. And so the costume itself dictated what the dance looked like and what was able to be done. The last form that Bob and Len taught us was what is called the Mexican, and it had the stamp, and the little snap of the figures. All right? Think about the Mexican costume with its long flowing dresses and the tendency of the Mexican dance to want to imitate the actions of the strutting roosters is really what it is strutting roosters. And this evolved over time. You know, I find it totally fascinating, and I guess at the tail end of this, since we're getting down to the end of time, I think heritage groups, performance dancing has a place. I think clubs that mix a strong portion of not only dancing but also social and somehow eventually singing back into the mixture and eating together has a place. And I think in doing that, we may make a better mixture of mortar to hang this bunch of bricks together. Anybody else want to say anything? Any questions? Thank you for letting me rave.
There is I put together a little bit of handout which has some information out of the Cowboy Dances book and a little background on it. Now, I do have them up here if anybody'd like to look at them. There's also a copy of the Round Dance, the American Dance Circle, which is the Lloyd Shaw publication. And there's an article in the back of this, which is what Cal just talked about, related to the history of the fellowship, which he put in there. I don't know whether he's even seen it, but it is in here, and so on. So there's a ton of information, and the Lloyd Shaw Foundation is active and is always looking for new members. I'll give a shameless plug here, because it does have a viable mission in our today's world. Thank you very much.
I need to talk to the next two speakers because you got a problem.